So Jeb Bush doesn't really want to be president. There's no way he wants to be president. No, it's not happening. And this reaction to the school shooting this past week in Oregon really proves that he does not want to be president.
A long time ago, I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about how, in schools you're not allowed to have prayer vigils, but the second you're not allowed to pray, I should say, or have, Christian or Jewish or whatever faith-based groups on these public education schools. But then the guy said, it's a funny thing. You send a guy in there with an Uzi or a handgun to shoot a bunch of people. The first thing they do after the tragedy, of course, prayer vigil, whatever the faith-based group is. And he always said that you should do that on the front end. Maybe you wouldn't have those tragedies on the back end.
Yeah, we're in a difficult time in our country, and I don't think more government is necessarily the answer to this. I think we need to reconnect ourselves with everybody else. It's very sad to see, but I resist the notion, and I had this challenge as governor, because look, stuff happens. There's always a crisis, and the impulse is always to do something, and it's not necessarily.
If it was hard to hear, his reaction is basically, stuff happens. The impulse is to do something when there's a mass shooting, and not just one mass shooting, an epidemic of mass shootings across the country. There's an impulse to do something about it, but stuff happens. But when a reporter came up to him afterwards and asked him, really, stuff happens? Don't you have something more to say? Jeb Bush had the opportunity to really go back in time and fix things. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it was just an off-the-cuff remark, but he said this instead.
There are two questions. One, was stuff happens a mistake then? And then second
No,
question,
it wasn't a mistake. I said exactly what I said. Why would you explain to me what I said wrong?
you said stuff happens.
Things happen all the time. Things. Is that better?
Yeah, dude.
Things happen now. Not just stuff. Things happen. And the interesting there when stuff and things happen is that people have an impulse to do something. And Jeb Bush brought up this sort of analogy as to why you shouldn't have an impulse to do something when a tragedy happens. He says, look, stuff happens, there's always a crisis, and the impulse is always to do something, and it's not necessarily the right thing to do. A child drowned in a pool, and the impulse is to pass a law that puts fencing around pools. Well, it may not change it. Or you have a car accident, and the impulse is to pass a law that deals with that unique event. And the cumulative effect of this is, in some cases, you don't solve the problem by passing the law, and you're imposing on large numbers of people burdens that make it harder for our economy to grow, make it harder to protect liberty. Yes, yes, yes. The analogy that he used is the child drowning in a pool. Why would you want to build a fence around a pool after a child drowns in it? That would be a dumb law. Don't you think so, Michael?
Oh, of course.
It'd be such a stupid
Ludicrous.
law. Why would anyone want to impose on our freedoms and our liberty to not have fences around our pools so children don't drown? Well, let's bring up this. After the House voted for 109-8 for the bill on Friday, Preston met Governor Jeb Bush, we're talking about the Florida House, who committed to signing a bill that requires new pool owners to pick a way to keep unsupervised children out of the water. This is talking about a 2002 law that required pool fencing named after a child, Preston De Iburn, who nearly drowned in a pool. Florida's Preston De Iburn / Mackenzie Miriam Residential Swimming Pool Safety Act was pushed for 3 years by then state rep and current Democratic National Committee Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and finally signed into law by Governor Jeb Bush. Well, stuff happens, things happen, kids drown, and you do something about them, Jeb. So maybe we should do something here when stuff and things happen.
He's open to pools, not mass shooting.